Welcome to our careers panel discussion this evening. My name is Jay Vroom. I'm an alumni of the University of Illinois chapter of Alpha Gamma Rho, the Alpha chapter, and we are pleased to welcome everybody to participate in this panel discussion. This is a part of our 66th biannual convention of Alpha Gamma Rho, the theme of which overall is Find Your Forward. We're delighted that tonight's program is co-hosted not only by Alpha Gamma Rho, but Ag Future America, AFA, and it is the only session of the AGR convention that is open to the public. And so welcome to everybody, AGRs and other friends and family alike, as we join in for this exciting panel discussion about employment through a pandemic era. Convention for our fraternity, which is way more than 100 years old, and so far so good. Things have gone very swimmingly thanks to a lot of hard work by our hardworking staff in Kansas City, as well as many volunteers. So please keep those questions coming in for our panel. They can be comments as well, and we really encourage the participation by all of you as audience members. We would also try to acknowledge some of you, so if you want to raise your hand in your Q&A question that you would not mind being called on, we may be able to engage you on camera and live on audio. So it's my pleasure to introduce your moderator for this evening, Ms. Charlene Finck. Charlene is the president of Farm Journal Media Companies. She has been with the company for 31 years. She's a proud alumni of the University of Missouri, and she has some connections to Alpha Gamma Rho that I'll allow her to explain to you in just a moment. Charlene has been a pioneer in the agricultural media industry for her entire career and is a very well-known leader in the entire agribusiness community, representing first and foremost the clients of Farm Journal, which are farmers across the United States. So please join me in welcoming Charlene Finck, our moderator for this evening's program. Charlene?
Oh, well, thank you, Jay. And I should start with some fun, because if we can't have fun tonight, why would we be here? But Jay like pointed me in that direction, of course, because this is the first time that I've been in an AGR event since that last party, last AGR gathering, call it party, that I attended when I was leaving Mizzou many years ago. But two of my brother-in-laws are AGR members, and loud and proud. And so it's a real honor to be with you guys this evening, and thank you for the invitation. We will continue to have fun through this, I promise. And we have really smart, but also really fun people on this panel. And I will always remember the rock stars that I met when I was in college, as well as the rock stars that I met in the many more years after college, and how they've influenced my career. And I think that's one of our opportunities tonight for each of us that are participating, and those panelists who've been very gracious to share their time. We can be inspired and learn together. But it is really pretty interesting. As all of us, I think, that are here probably know at very different places in this journey, that COVID has changed everything. And as a mother of an incoming college senior, whose summer internships and residencies and everything else she had lined up that was picture perfect imploded, and the year that's ahead, as well as my role as president of Farm Journal, I certainly understand both sides of this equation. And in both cases, it's very evident that the world has changed and will always be different. Different isn't bad, different is different. And it's what we make of it and what we do with it. And I think and I hope that all of us are here to learn together on what different looks like and how we can change and iterate and make the most of it for what's best for agriculture. And I think that we've navigated that with our daughter, but I'm even more confident because we have a cavalry of talent at Farm Journal that we're navigating to help honor what's so important, but also change with the way the world is changing, and acknowledge that and change with it. And in many regards, as much as I hate to like anything about COVID, it's a nudge for companies and a nudge for all of us as individuals to change our expectations and change our value equation and change how we do things. And I'm looking forward to learning from the panelists, and I will listen with empathy, because at Farm Journal, we have been really like embracing, these are the facts, this is the world, but we have to serve those that we get up every day to serve with our farmers and our growers and our agribusiness customers as well. And so I've spent an enormous amount of my time, the last 122 days, not that I'm counting, on the Farm Journal field days. And that's a very fast time to launch anything, as you guys know, but it's one of the most exciting things because it's a way to create the new American Farm Show experience with live and virtual events, just like a little bit like this, in that virtual takes front stage, of course, and is really important. And then, but we also use it as not only for education, but for a rallying cry for agriculture. And I feel like that's a lot of what we're doing now for Future Talent tonight. It's a rallying cry. There's opportunities out there, let's go get them, and I think our panelists will help us chart a path to getting those. But also, we're dedicating our finale for the Farm Journal Field Days to our hashtag Farm On concert, which is Lee Bryce and some of his country music friends and many more to come, who are going to raise funds to support the National 4-H Council and their Forward Fund as our way to support youth across the nation and give back. So these are incredibly different times, but I think it's the time that we can weave that tapestry together. And I hope at the end of this amazing panel, we'll be able to think about even more things than we've ever thought about. Because when you get these many great minds together, who knows what will inspire and what that will mean for different careers. So I'm excited to hear from the perspectives of the four inspiring panelists. And you guys have the bios, so I'm not gonna go through those. They all have amazing careers, amazing. But I do think we shouldn't start on the discussion without you getting to know these individuals better, because they're all special, amazing people. So with that, I would like to just announce each individual and their titles and their roles in their organization, and then ask them an icebreaker question, which means let's just get to know each other question, and let you learn more about them. And then we'll segue into some more serious topics. If that's okay, can I get a thumbs up from the panelists? Yes? All right, we're good. Oh, Mark, I didn't see a thumbs up.
Oh, I was there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right, I missed it. That's perfect. So even though I'm picking on Mark, we'll start with Brett. Brett Sciotto is the president and CEO of Aimpoint Research. That may not be an organization you're familiar with, or you might be very familiar with them. And by the end of this, I promise it will be both. So I'm really interested, Scott, for you to share. I mean, I obviously know that, and many others, that you have a military career. That's one of the foundational points of your business today and of your training. And I'm interested in you sharing what was your first job in the military, and how does that impact you today, and how you're serving agriculture?
Well, first of all, thank you, Charlene. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and excited to get into this topic. So I did have an interesting path into agriculture. I was an Army intelligence officer after I graduated from West Point. and had a lot of really unique jobs in the intelligence world. My first job, to answer your question, was I was what was called a battalion S2, which means I was the intelligence officer for one of our battalions. My job was to help the operational people understand what the battlefield looked like and what threats we might encounter and how to best approach whatever it was that we were attempting to achieve during the upcoming mission. But probably the most influential role I had in the military was I was the fusion chief for the 101st Airborne Division. And in that role, I had the opportunity to kind of look across lots and lots of sources of intelligence, bring them together as though they were puzzle pieces in the middle of the table, and patch them together into a more cohesive view of the current state and the future state. And that fusion mentality, that approach to intelligence collection and analysis is really what I built Aimpoint on. So that became foundational to who we are.
Wow. Well, I didn't know that. That's wonderful. Terrific. Mark, you're up next. Mark Stewart is President and CEO of the Agriculture Future of America, which we all call AFA with pride. So I'm interested in what was your first mistake you ever made in a job.
Oh, the first mistake I ever made in a
We all
job.
have.
There's too many to count. Actually cut my teeth. One of the first real professional jobs was in fundraising in the higher ed space. And so I would put together direct mail pieces for all the students in the room. Guess what? Your institutions are coming after you for money soon. That was me. I did that job. So there were many mailings that I probably goofed up. I didn't get fired. I also ran our phone-a-thon, which means student callers calling our alumni and also asking for money, twisting arms. So that was a lot of fun. My very first job was sacking groceries. You want to talk about cutting your teeth. You learn how to communicate really well. And if you don't sack groceries right, you'd be surprised the kind of feedback that you get. So still to this day, I pay attention when people are sacking groceries, but I'm much more polite than most people were to me back in the day. But that's how I got through high school. So kind of fell into agriculture, if I'm being blunt. I am a generation removed, and that's not uncommon. And when we talk about employment in this space, that's becoming more and more common. So I can relate in some regards. I worked in higher education, as I said. I also worked on the other end of the spectrum in social services and youth development in that space. And I was looking for something different. And AFA is a beautiful hybrid between meaningful social sort of work where you get to see, taste, touch, feel the difference that you make, because we work really closely with college students, but we're not a higher ed institution. So we can do whatever we want to do. There's not a lot of bureaucracy. And our job today is to lift up young people and help them seek opportunities in the ag space. And so I'll obviously bring that perspective to the conversation.
Excellent. Terrific. And as you those who are attending, if you listen to these little vignettes and comments from our panelists and it starts to spark a question, please now and throughout go to the Q&A function on Zoom and type it in, and we will, as Jay mentioned, we will answer it right now tonight, or we'll follow up, because these guys have been so gracious to be willing to continue to interact and answer questions until all of you have had a response. So with that, Lisa Safarian, who is President of North America for the Crop Science Division of Bayer. And you obviously, Lisa, have, yes, there she is, had a very impressive career. So I'd like you to share with us, if you could, what your first job was. I know a lot about what your job is now, but not so much about where you began, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. This is a great forum, and I'm really glad that you're doing this for, kids who are in college, right? I shouldn't say kid, but I've got a son that's a rising senior in college, and he's got a lot of these same questions. Of course, he doesn't want to hear any answers from me. So, but glad we do this. My first job was at Monsanto, and I was a co-op student. So while I was still in school, my degree was actually in IT and business administration. So my first job was actually going to Monsanto as a co-op student. I did that twice. And then I ended up hiring on full time, and You know, Montana was bought out by Bayer a couple years ago, but it's my 34th year now when you add it all up. So I pretty much stayed put in the same space. I am not from a farm. I'm not even one generation removed. I don't even know how many generations I'd have to go back. We're coal miners, we're not farmers. But, you know, once I got into this space and started working with farmers and retailers and that whole space, I just fell in love with it. And I always said I'd start my job, go do my first job. I'd work for a couple of years and then I'd go figure out what I was going to do. I took the LSAT. I was going to go to law school, but just really liked what I did. And so I've just progressed through the organization that way.
Wow. That is quite a tale of success. And we can take this offline, but your journey and my journey, even though I started at a farm versus the coal mining family, is so remarkably similar.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a lawyer too.
Come a long way from coal mining. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. Ruth Kimmelshue, welcome. She's the Senior Vice President of Business Operations and Supply Chain at Cargill. And you probably have the most fun question of the night. And that is, what is your favorite hobby? Or it can be your favorite quarantine hobby, if you prefer.
Wow. So thank you, Charlene, and thanks to AGR for hosting the panel and AFA for supporting it. Before I go there, I have to give you a little bit of background that's not in my bio.
Oh, good.
I actually have 3 generations of men in my family who were AGRs. So my grandfather was at Alpha Chapter back in the days of Maynard Coe, who was one of the founders of AGR. My father and 4 of my uncles also were at Alpha Chapter. And then my 4 brothers were all at Chi Chapter at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And so there's a long and deep history of AGR in my family, and I'm a super loyal AGR supporter. My son, my oldest child, is getting ready to go to Purdue in just a couple of weeks. And so no pressure, but it would be really exciting if he would think about joining AGR. So I'm trying to feed him as much information as I possibly can, because I think it would be cool if he could be the 4th generation in the family to be at AGR. So that's just a little color and background and special loyalty that I have to the organization. The most fun thing to do during COVID is actually I've started cooking a whole lot more. I love to cook. I grew up cooking. My mother was a phenomenal cook. And you know, the reality is trying to balance career and family and all of the other activities that go on, you know, having a takeout pizza is sometimes the best that we can do as a family. But one of the real benefits of COVID has been I'm not traveling anymore. I'm here at home. And so when I finish my day, I can go out into the kitchen, cook a meal for my family. We sit at the table together and we actually do what I used to do growing up. I grew up on a farm. I'm a 5th generation farmer. But, you know, sit around the table and talk about your day. And so that has been a real benefit of this time, just that opportunity for us to be together.
Isn't that the truth? You take the good with the bad. And I don't know how you feel about traveling, but are you looking forward to going back to traveling, or are you okay with the new model?
I will look forward to going back to some travel, but I am actually hopeful that I don't have to go back to the level of travel that I previously did. I think we've learned we can interact in this way. It is very effective. Mm-hmm. Actually, I think the virtual interaction is in many ways the great normalizer or great equalizer, if you will, whether it's from a diversity standpoint, whether it's from a global corporation and ensuring that you've got all the voices in the room from around the world. A virtual interaction makes everything equal and allows for, in some ways, a richer discussion. So we're learning every day. And that's amazing. Lisa, like you, I've had a long and you know, super interesting and exciting career. And I like to think after 32 years, it's remarkable that we can continue to learn how to operate in a whole different way. And it's kind of exciting in some ways.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue actually into something that I wanted to talk with each of you about and have you share your insights on is what you've learned through this experience and how it's going to change how you think companies move forward and how they conduct business. And then, of course, what that might mean to those new graduates or young folks in their career that are establishing their path forward. So, Ruth, do you want to add to that before we move to others?
Well, I just think that, you know, one of the things that we know has been really critical to our ability to continue to operate successfully are things that we knew before, but are coming, you know, are becoming increasingly more important. And those two things are resilience and agility. And so if we can create an environment and we can create capability amongst people to be resilient and optimistic, as well as agile and able to manage through change and to really embrace change and in many ways lead it, I think we're going to continue to be successful. And those are the characteristics and the capabilities that we see continuing to deliver success amongst, you know, our 150,000 employees across the world of Cargill.
That's a pretty good data set. So thank you for sharing. Lisa, how about you? What are you seeing at Bayer, and what have you learned through this journey that you would be wisdom to pass along to those on the call?
Yeah, you know, I think something that's really interesting is how you manage talent. And in the past, we had the belief that you had to be at headquarters to have certain jobs. And if you weren't willing to move, then you were opting out of a bigger career and bigger opportunities. And quite frankly, we were losing a lot of new thought, different ways of doing things, and probably losing out on a lot of talent. What we found, to Ruth's point, this is just as effective in many ways. Now, certainly face-to-face is still key, tough negotiations, building a relationship, but generally speaking, there's a lot that can get done this way. And we found, I have some people still in Germany who can't get back over here. And now they've got a terrible time zone problem, right? They're working second shift essentially, but what it's really allowing us to see is we can bring talent in without making them move anywhere. And so it's really going to open up opportunities for people who just don't want to leave where they're from or don't want to leave where their spouse has another career, and still have an amazing amount of upward potential that we would not let them have in the past, quite frankly, because they wouldn't move. And so we're really seeing the excitement people have about taking on projects and doing jobs from where they're at. And I really think it's opening up our existing talent pipeline even much broader than we ever had anticipated.
Wow, that's exciting.
Can I add on to that, Charlene?
Of course you can. This is a conversation. We love conversation.
We've got an interesting perspective because we work with the Bayers and the Cargills, and when we work with the young people, and a point of friction for the longest time, and it's interesting that Lisa brought this up, has been mobility. And we studied trends of generations, and I know in some cases they're stereotypical, but Gen Z, and part of the trends was maybe a little bit less mobility. Maybe a willingness at first, but ultimately wanting to settle closer to home. And so it's going to be sort of an arms race, if you will, to on if you've got a competition on talent, which there already was one, is how quickly companies will adjust to do that, Lisa, to your point, and do it well and do it right, so that the young people coming out are going to be, they're just going to be more attracted to those types of opportunities. So it's a totally different conversation than 4 months ago, which was, we'd have board members that would share with young people, if you want to move up, you need to be mobile. It's totally different now.
So what you're basically, between the two of you, are saying there's more opportunities for
Absolutely
professionals at any point in their career because more responsive.
And the competition to the talent was, the earlier you can hire them, the better talent you're going to get. You're going to get them committed early in the school year for when they graduate. And now it's it's going to be a whole, it's not a timing thing now. It's are you going to let me work where I want to work? And it's just going to create a whole nother, a race for competition for talent.
Changing paradigm. Yes, for sure. And I believe, Jay, you have some comment from our audience that
Yes.
might provide some perspective as well.
Yeah, thanks to Jordan Freeman, who wrote in our Q&A box, the virtual interaction has allowed for disabled people like myself to communicate with the world and on campus. So I think that's a terrific addition to what you've already been saying, and thanks to Jordan for sharing that perspective.
No, that's terrific.
I think that the opportunity for diversity in this goes back to that, you know, virtual interaction equalizes everything. So it's important for diversity of all sorts. It's important for people with different abilities, you know, and so it's actually, having been for a long time, and Lisa, you can certainly appreciate this. I know one of the only women in the, you know, in the industry. Not so much anymore. We've seen a whole, you know, significant entrance of really talented people from all different backgrounds and all types of diversity. But if it just makes it easier for all of us to interact at the same level, and I think that's super positive.
Yeah,
I agree completely. The voices at the table. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I'm agreeing.
I love when you all talk. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Adaptability, agility, I mean, those are hallmarks of great organizations. I think all of us have found ourselves in this new territory, but most have had a really positive result from this. It's been one of the things that is positive coming from the pandemic. You know, we started to work in Europe back in 2014, and so there probably wasn't a day that would go by that we weren't already using video technology, but we were always resistant to allowing our workforce to be fully decentralized. And we've always had headquarters and all that, still do. But the question becomes, can you build culture? Can you build trust? Can you build relationships? It's easy for a team that already trusts each other, works together, to decentralize, as we have been since March now, and continue to drive productivity. We have some new employees we're continuing to grow and hire, and that's what we're working through now, is how do you build culture? How do you build trust? How do you build teamwork in a fully virtual environment? And I think the answer is it's got to be a hybrid. And I think all of us are learning what that balance should be over time. But I think the net results of all of this is this technology has been incredible. It's opened the aperture to the talent that we can go out and get as our company around the world and around the country, and allow people to live where they want to live and still be a productive member of the team. So there's a balance there, but it's certainly been positive for Aimpoint.
And I think on Brett's point, you know, we're not going to go back to the same way it was.
Right.
And so if you're sitting around thinking, well, that's okay, in 6 months, 9 months, whatever pick your number, because nobody knows, we're all going to go back together. That's not going to happen. And even as we try to bring people into the office this fall, if you keep your 6 feet of separation and all the things that the CDC would tell you to do, we can't all fit anyway. And so we need to figure these things out about culture, about how do you help people who don't have those relationships yet, or those networks, they're younger in career, or they're new to the organization. We need to figure that out, because even when, quote, we're back to normal, we're not going to be back to the way it was. It'll be a new normal, a completely new normal, even once there's a vaccine or anything else. So they're tricky, but what's also great about having everybody have a voice at the table is there's plenty of good ideas and new ideas, and they don't necessarily come from the people you normally get your ideas from. They come from others who have different experiences, who do have their own voice at the table, and that's what's going to help us solve the problem.
No,
I think one of the things that we've seen is, to the point about new voices, is new talent showing up. Like, because we all were operating in a normal that we were comfortable with and familiar with, and when that changed, it created the need for different capabilities and different approaches. And so we've been really amazed to see people step up and really be successful that maybe were not quite as comfortable in the old way of working, or hadn't yet found their voice or their place, but have been able to really lean into this new way of working and contribute in significant and really powerful ways. And that has been exciting as well, because it gives us some insight into talent that we didn't necessarily have before. And then there's people like myself who, you know, it's been a little more challenging to figure out how do you operate in the new, you know, way of working. And so it's been fun to see that evolution as we've continued to work to be effective at executing against the work that we have to do.
That's a perfect segue to a question from an undergrad from Kansas State who asks, what have you found to be the most important skills for those managing multiple roles and working from home?
I would say expectation setting and boundaries. So the first piece, I have to remind myself, I have a 13-year-old special needs daughter, but my husband stays home. So online learning, day-to-day care, everything that happens, I can come down to the basement where they've shoved me for quarantine, you know, during this time. And I can wander down here at 6:30 in the morning and wander back up at 6 p.m. and the world is fine. Everyone's been fed, everything's been taken care of. But that's not reality for everybody. And especially younger people with younger families who, you know, who have a lot of a different dynamic going on with COVID and working from home. It's what are the expectations, and it's compassion, and it's understanding everybody's different than you. And so you need to ask people, what do they need? You know, we talk a lot, what do you need? Well, they need more breaks during the day to teach their child, or whatever they need. And so how do we accommodate that? Because these are committed people who'll still get their job done, but we're going to have to do it differently, and we have to be open to it. So I can't just call a meeting in an hour like I used to be able to, and something emergency comes up, because you know what? Somebody might be teaching their child or taking care of their child or their parent or whatever that is. And so we need flexibility and we need boundaries. You know, you could work yourself to death because it's so easy. I could just wander down here and never leave and get, quote, caught up, which we know is a fallacy. So it's really having those ongoing, honest conversations about what you need to get through this. And that seems to be really the best medicine for it.
So you think that'll create a different cadence of business? That's more.
I don't know that it creates a different cadence. I think it creates a lot more flexibility. So people believe, you know, again, the old thought, you have to be here a certain amount of time. I have to be able to see you. You have to be available. All those things are out the window now, because the fact is we're doing fine. We're meeting our customers' needs. We're getting our product out the door. We didn't skip a beat on all of that. And yet people are doing business and their jobs incredibly differently than you would have ever thought would have worked. And you know what? It works just fine. And so I do think it changes that new normal. And I think it helps people feel empowered, and it gives them the opportunity to live their life a little more like they might want to from a work-life balance perspective in the future as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's also really important that we are super clear on expectations and on how we judge success or how we judge results. And so both from a manager standpoint as well as an employee standpoint, getting really clear about, okay, what are your expectations of me? And what are my expectations of you? And how do I know if you're actually accomplishing what it is that we intend for you to accomplish? And then judging each other based on the results, as opposed to, as Lisa said, you know, that tendency to, I see Ruth in the office, therefore I believe she's working. And if I don't see Ruth in the office, I don't really know what she's doing. Well, actually, if we're really clear on what the expectations are and then how we judge success, the flexibility around when and how you get the work done it's less important as seeing what the actual results are. And so I think that's something that I'm working with my teams to be more clear on. And I think it's an important thing for, especially for new entrants into the workforce, new entrants into any company or into any working situation, to try to be really clear and articulate on those expectations.
Brett, I'm going to pivot over to you if you'd like, but I really am interested in all the research that you're doing with farmers and ranchers and on behalf of companies and others. I know you have to be careful about what you share. I'm interested in what perspective you could provide us in terms of what the farmer of the future or the retailer of the future or the ecosystem, if you will, in agriculture might look like, thank you, COVID, and where that might be taking us.
Sure. We've just completed 2 different landmark studies, one called Farmer of the Future and the other one, Next Generation Consumer. And those were outgrowths of the observation that the pace of change was accelerating in agriculture, that it was very dynamic, and we needed to understand who was succeeding and who was struggling, and what were the attributes of those farmers that were making it? What were the attributes of the farmers who were growing and getting stronger in a time of great challenge, which we've been through for years now. Even before the pandemic, it was a struggling and challenging time for agriculture. So we did a psychographic segmentation, which was really fascinating. We identified 5 different segments of farmers across the farmer rancher universe. And we profiled them in a way that was not traditional for segmentation. We really get deep into who they are, how they view the industry, how they make decisions, how they see success, and how they drive their organization towards their vision. And what we found is that 2 groups, well, one we call independent elites and the other one enterprising business builders, which account for about 41% of the farmer rancher universe today, are the entrepreneurial class. They're the most adaptable, the most agile. They're having the most success, even through a time of great challenge. Then there are 3 other groups that are, for various reasons, are struggling more to make ends meet and ultimately keep their operation and moving in a positive way. We overlaid some wargaming results. We use a tool we call wargaming. We do an industry war game every fall, and we bring industry leaders from across the agri-food value chain together to explore the dynamics of the future, and then to test the action and reaction of organizations like those on the panel here, how we will all act in order to achieve a competitive advantage in a new normal, a new state, a future state. And then we overlaid that psychographics on those wargaming results, and we really had a clear picture of what we believe where agriculture is headed by 2040, and the farmers and their unique characteristics that will allow them to navigate that dynamic change and ultimately succeed. But you can't look just through agriculture's lens and have a perfect understanding. And so we endeavored to look at it also through the consumer lens back at the agri-food value chain and say, okay, what's the next generation consumer look like? Who are they? And what will they require of all of us in agriculture? And then we found those common threads, those commonalities that will really become foundational to the transformation that our agri-food value chain is going through, this 4th revolution of agriculture that I think we're beginning, that will change the game substantially. And it's exciting. It's challenging, but also exciting. And that's why I think this topic is so important, because that future workforce, those future leaders of agriculture have to know that there's some incredibly exciting things transforming agriculture today, and they have unlimited opportunities to be part of that change, that revolution. And luckily, I think a lot of those changes that we're going through now and into the future play to the next generation's strengths. You know, they're the most diverse, they're entrepreneurial, they're technologically savvy, they're emotionally intelligent. They have all these great attributes that make the folks that are listening today perfect to help this revolution take root and ultimately be achieved. And it's a great time to be part of agriculture. And those studies have helped, I heard us talking earlier about travel. I used to travel every single week. I gave Farmer of the Future speech probably 120 times last year alone. And, we got to spread the message. We have to get traditional organizations to start to pivot faster, start to transform faster. But it truly is an exciting time, notwithstanding pandemics and challenges. Agriculture is resilient. It's foundational in national security. We will prevail and get stronger. It's just making the change and being as adaptable as we need to be.
Great segue into a question from an undergrad from the University of Nebraska, Brett. Thank you for that. So you guys know exactly what people are going to ask. It's perfect. And the question from Zachary is, how can we better prepare our members to face an agricultural world that is turning more and more to technology? And they use social media as an example, online business meetings, obviously, and etiquette, and relevant classes that aren't always taken. Who would like to start there? Mark, looks to me like you might.
You could explore the opportunities that we have to provide young men and women in college. So our whole space is that sort of soft skill space. So there aren't classes for some of these things on college campuses, which is why we even existed. So etiquette, communication skills, whether it be body language or something like, online platform communication. I mean, that's the space that we play in, that kind of bridges that technical competence that they get in their degree programs to what employers say they really need. We're not the only organization that does that, but young people today need to find ways to hone those skills, whether you call them soft skills or employability skills or whatever. But, the reality is, you've got to make yourself stand out, and those are the types of things that help you stand out. And it doesn't really matter if it's an online interview or an in-person interview. You got to be creative and make yourself stand out in one way or the other, and honing those skills, finding a way to develop yourself personally outside of the classroom. You don't always have to be the president of your club or organization or whatever. Those things help. But if you can demonstrate the things that you've done to develop yourself personally and professionally, every interview you go to, it's going to stand out, and they're going to ask you examples for how you've done that. And so we can't express it enough because we hear it all the time. That's what employers are looking for, and it's often overlooked. And so there's all sorts of ways you can do those things. Again, you don't have to be a part of formal organizations like ours, but every employer out there wants young people to develop soft skills. And in today's day and age, you just got to be creative in how you stand out. And, young people today are creative. So it's certainly doable.
Lisa and Ruth, is that what you're experiencing as well in each of your companies?
So the skills that Mark talks about are definitely ones that help you stand out. You can take somebody who's really smart, had great grades, and is very functionally talented, but if they don't have some of those other skills, it's really hard. Somebody who maybe doesn't have as high of grades, but can hold themselves professionally and maintains those has those soft skills will get the job first. So it's not just the GPA, and it's not just the number of things on your resume. It's how you come across. And, are you just a real person, and are you just coming across as a real you, and who are you? So I would say that's definitely it. Taking a more structured approach, though, I would recommend anybody on this call who is maybe in your earlier years of university, think about adding on some sort of a digital class, a digital degree, math, statistics, those sorts of things, because it's true, the ag world is going much more in that direction, and you don't necessarily have to have a degree in it. It helps if that's the kind of job you want, but certainly if you've got an agronomy degree and you also have some experience in the digital space, you immediately stand out, because that's what we need. And so as I think about our hiring, we hire across the board, but at any given time, I probably have 50 openings for a data engineer, a data scientist, a statistician, those types of folks who are helping us in our marketing or in our R&D or all over the business. And so I would just recommend, if you can fit it in your schedule, I would highly recommend taking some classes along those lines.
I think that's tremendous advice. And, I loved what Brett had to say about the research and analysis that they have done. And I also loved what he said about the revolution that's coming in agriculture. I actually think that there has been no more exciting time to be involved in agriculture and food than what we're facing into right now. And I actually wish that I were at the beginning of my career as opposed to closer to the end, because I think it's going to be a super dynamic, super interesting, incredibly impactful marketplace to be in and career to develop in food and agriculture. I think that Lisa's comment about this idea around digital is critical. So the ability to take data and turn it into information that then can create insights is so important for the future. And if you have that ability to take that data, find information, create insights, and relate it to the other disciplines that you might have capability in the food and ag space, you are going to be a very attractive candidate for every employer in the food and ag space, and you're going to be able to be very successful as well. And so, as Lisa says, finding those data analysts, those, you know, we call them quants. I mean, even in trading and risk management, people with quantitative skills today are so sought after. And if you understand and have some perspective on agriculture on top of it, all the better. I mean, you can, in some ways, write your ticket, because those skills and capabilities are becoming increasingly critical. The other thing I would say is the way that we think about food and agriculture for the future is changing dramatically. I had the opportunity to visit a vertical farm in the San Francisco Bay Area, a little less than a year ago. And as someone who grew up in an almond and bean farm in Northern California, and I walked into this farm that was inside a warehouse and saw vertical farming with lettuce and strawberries, and then to taste the products, it was remarkable. It was like I stood there and I thought, I'm looking at the future right now. And the positive sustainability impacts of that kind of agriculture, it won't be all of agriculture, but it will be an important part for the future. And so those kinds of new and different spaces that food and agriculture is moving into need new and different kinds of skills and capabilities. And so we're seeing a blurring of the lines between across disciplines, but being curious about what some of those disciplines might be that could be interesting to help propel you to a new place in the industry, I think is something that would be super critical and helpful as you move into the workplace.
Interesting. So as I look at the questions and the comments that are coming in, there seems to be one thing, no surprise, that's woven through many of those. Well, there's actually two things. One is, how does broadband, and we know the answer to this, that it is a huge factor across the nation, especially in rural areas. How is that going to be impactful and jumped over as a hurdle, I guess, for employment? And then the other thing is how do you compensate for never meeting a human being that you go to work for? Or are you guys hiring a human being you've never met before? And I think those two things are at the center, most likely, for many challenges in hires and lots of fears and uncertainty, if you would, not just for new graduates, but for those changing careers and trying to advance their opportunities. Those questions were from the audience, guys. They're really good ones, but I know they're tough ones to answer.
I don't know that I have, I'm not going to have any, I'll make a couple of comments. We hired our first employee fully remote. I've never met her. She's been on the job 3 months and it's gone exceedingly well. So, you know, it can happen. You have to be much more diligent about how you vet and what that looks like. But if you had asked me if that was possible and I would have been comfortable with it 5-6 months ago, I probably wouldn't have agreed. So back to your, Charlene, your kick in the pants comment, like we're getting thrust into this. Yeah, it's doable. I'm an example of rural. I'm actually at the office. I live 10 miles from the airport and I have a Kansas City, Missouri address. I can't get reliable internet. That's why I came here for this call. And so if I'm an example, and I'm not even in a rural area, it's a big issue. And when you think about education, like for my young kids, it's going to become a significant challenge if I can't find a solution. And I'm in Kansas City, Missouri. I don't have a solution. It's just a vent. So I'll let smarter people respond to that.
Yeah, we've hired 3 since the pandemic, and we did it all remotely. And I only recently met them, and it's been incredible how they've jumped in. They've been part of the team. They've communicated. We've been able to discern what their skill sets are and gotten them on the right project teams. And it's gone really well. So I do think it's possible, but I come back to my previous comment. What is the limitation of building culture and trust through that? And I think it's an open question. I'm not suggesting you can't do it. I think at some point, there's still an important face-to-face component to bringing people together so that they can build that glue, but we'll see. The world is in an evolutionary phase here. Rural broadband, in my opinion, is one of the most critical issues that we all face. I think for lots of reasons. The data and technological advancements that we need to make on farms has to be facilitated by rural broadband. The connectivity that we just talked about with students and employees and people. We have an opportunity right now with this pandemic to reverse, or at least to slow down, the macro trend of people moving from rural America into the urban centers. If you don't have to be 10 minutes from your office anymore, you can work out in rural America. We can stop that flight to urban centers, but they have to be able to connect and do this. And so I think it's in the top one or two issues in my mind of things that we can fix. And we have to have the will and put the money together. The government needs to get involved. There's a great coalition of organizations, leading organizations in ag that are working on it. You got Elon Musk putting satellites up. We're making progress, but we need to make it a more urgent matter, I think, and priority.
Lisa?
Yeah, we haven't stopped hiring. We haven't stopped hiring. So it's been remote, and I echo everything. We've got to do a little more diligence. And I would offer to those in the audience, I would argue even practicing remote interviewing might even be a little easier. You can do Zoom, with your friend, your mom, whoever, because, it is more focused, right? There's nothing to look at except for your face, and that's it. So, but we've done it, and we're going to continue to do it. Look, we have to keep hiring. We've got to keep our business moving forward, and that's what we're going to do. Hopefully we get to meet these people in person someday, right? That's true for all of us, but we just got to keep going. And again, I would have said we would have never have done it. I would have never found it to be acceptable in January of this last year. But here we are, and it's kind of becoming somewhat commonplace. And let's face it, instead of putting somebody on a plane and flying them across the country for a 1-hour interview, a night in a hotel and sending them back, wow, what a great savings to be able to do it. So again, I don't think this is something that goes away. I don't think you do every hire this way, but I think there's going to be a whole lot of hiring that's still done in the future that's just much more expedient for everybody to do it virtually.
Yeah, and I think this piece around, we're hiring as well. I mean, we've hired hundreds of people virtually and started them in their jobs and onboarded them. And I've had interactions with new employees, trying to get to know them and learn more about them. And so, I think in some ways it can be super effective and efficient. I think this question about culture and building culture and building trust is going to be one that we're going to have to really work on. And in fact, related to that, we had originally said, you know what, we have an office center here in Minneapolis. We have about 2,000 employees who office there normally. And we sent a survey out to our employee base and said, how many people, want to come back on a more regular basis? And it was only about 10%. And so our initial reaction was, okay, well, gee, we'll figure out how to operate in that part, in person, part virtual world. But then we started talking about this question of culture and building trust. And part of what makes Cargill unique is our culture. And it's really important that we retain and support that. And so I think that over time we will move toward at least some requirement that people come into the office on some level of regularity. I don't know if that's once a week, once a month, 5 times a month, I have no idea. But trying to move back to some combination at some point in time, and not going to, the initial tendency was, sure, we'll let everybody work virtually. We got to figure it out. And so it is finding some sort of a balance, which I think will be important. Unless we figure out that, you actually can maintain a culture, you can build trust effectively virtually. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. But again, agility and resilience are the 2 things that we got to keep driving for as it relates to kind of how we operate in this new world.
And everything with an open mind, right? Hearts
say open mind,
know to
absolutely.
get open. It's so very true. Well, and this is definitely all great advice, and I'm interested in whether if it's a really easy question, like you can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Do you think that this increases the opportunity for AGR individuals as well as others in agriculture, or decreases it or keeps it the same? It's just a visual up, down, splat.
You mean the changes from COVID? Yeah.
Looks like all ups. Wow. That's super encouraging. It really is. And to build upon that, if you were to give a piece of advice to undergraduates on how they start their career given these times and capitalize on what everybody gave a thumbs up for, what would that be?
I would take the open-minded further. Be open-minded. You may think you want a particular job. I have had many very particular functional jobs through my career. So I've not always been a marketer. I've not always been sales management. I've not always been IT. I've not always been operations or supply chain. I've done all those things. But, I think it's about having an open mind, not just short term, but what's your long-term game as well. What's going to get you the right opportunities that you can build on for the future. And don't just be set on a particular type of career or a particular type of company. There are lots of opportunities, whether it's startups, whether it's one of the big established suppliers, whether it's on the food side. There's a lot of different things that are out there that weren't out there even 3 years ago. And so it's not just, well, here I've got 6 big companies to choose from, and that's kind of how it goes. There's an amazing amount of opportunity out there all across the board. And so be open to it and look at it.
I was going to say, in a time like this, positivity will go a long way. As an organization, we talk a lot about the concept of entrepreneurialism. So act like an entrepreneur no matter what you do. So bring innovative thinking and solutions to your job no matter what, and that'll take you a long way. And we did our first ever virtual, we had a Crop Science Institute the last few days, and I heard a professional give a piece of advice. They wanted to be known for something. They wanted to be excellent at one piece of their job so that when somebody had an issue or a question, they would come to them. So when you're early on, focus on what you can get excellent at and be known for that so that people will come to you. And as you rise, then you diversify and spread I thought that was pretty profound and a great way to kind of like keep your head down. But you got to bring solutions, you got to bring ingenuity, be entrepreneurial in your spirit and enthusiastic, and that'll go a long way.
And I would add, build relationships. I think it's the most powerful force on the planet. The people, especially in agriculture, but really I've found in my career, people are willing to talk. They're willing to meet, even like this. They're willing to collaborate. They're willing to listen, and they're willing to share. And you can't wait for a better time to come in the future to start pursuing those relationships. You can start right now. You can start tomorrow to build that network, build those relationships outside of your class, outside of those traditional circles, and do the other things. Be open-minded, explore what your passion is, and know that this is an incredible industry, dynamic and broad, and there are lots of players and lots of people and lots of organizations that are making a difference. And don't be afraid to explore them, and don't get caught in a rut too early and not build those relationships. You never stop building relationships.
Charlene, I thought about, does my advice change because of the current circumstance? And as I reflected, I thought it really doesn't. I mean, I would tell, job seekers today the exact same thing that I would have told them before, 9, 10 months ago, a year ago. And that is, first of all, know what your strengths are. Know what you're really, really good at and bring that to the table. Almost importantly, know what you're not good at and understand how you work to fill that gap, or how you work to compensate for that lesser strength, if you will. But really leverage your strengths. work hard and deliver results, and they will speak for themselves, but you got to bring value to the table. And so continue to, and if you're leveraging your strengths and you're doing what you love, it's very likely that you're going to bring value to the table. And so, but you have to be able to deliver results, take action, take initiative, raise your hand, even though, as Lisa says, it may not be the job that you really dreamed of having. Raise your hand, because people will notice that you were willing to step up and take action and take initiative. And then finally, figure out what impact you want to have, and align that impact with your strengths and what you believe is really important. I like to tell people, find a company or find an organization that the values of the organization align with your own personal values, because when those two come together, you're going to be successful. You're going to be doing something that you believe in, something that you're good at, and you're going to be able to deliver successful results. And it'll be fun along the way as well, because you're doing what you're meant to be doing through all of those experiences. So my advice during this time, hasn't changed at all from the same advice that I would have given about a year ago.
And if I had to guess, I bet that's emblematic of your career. From what I know about it, find a passion, find your superpowers, make the most of it, have fun, and it's a home run. Yep. It's good advice, most definitely. So if you were looking for your very first job, though, how would you expect to be interacting with recruiting, or to making those superpowers known and making your passion known? How would you just give 3 points of guidance to those that, it might be their first rodeo at looking, probably not for an internship or a scholarship or a fellowship, but perhaps for their first real job? What would you tell them to focus on?
Yeah, I think for us, I know our recruiters right now are working super hard to figure out, how do you build the relationship with potential employees, and how do you understand what they're great at and what they would bring to the organization. And so the good news is, we're on both sides of the table, we're figuring it out. I think, it's really similar to the way that it was before. You got to be able to bring the examples of what you bring to the organization. Demonstrate a can-do attitude, demonstrate interest and optimism, be really clear on who you are and what's important to you. I don't know that it's changed dramatically, but, bring all of yourself to the conversation. I think maybe one thing that is different is finding the right balance of how you get comfortable talking about yourself and telling your stories in a way that is authentic, and also aligns with some of the opportunities that the company has articulated that they are looking to pursue or looking to fill. So there is this authenticity piece, but not being afraid to talk about yourself in a way that is appropriately proud and humble, and finding that right kind of balance.
And if you've built your resume with your extracurriculars, right? Your boards you're on, your secretary of your group, whatever those things are, those should also be building a story about what you're good at, and so what is that superpower, as opposed to just a random list of just things you did because you thought they'd look good on a resume, right? And you can really build that story based upon those things that you did, because again, they should be things that you're interested in, that align with your values, that align really with what your strengths are and what you like to do. And that is an easy way to kind of build your story around what's already on your resume from your extracurriculars. And that's, feels maybe a little more natural than just saying, hey, I'm a great, whatever. But build those around that to tell that full story.
We talk about that in the terms of reflect and regurgitate. So reflect on those experiences. What did you really gain, and what are your strengths or superpowers, and how do you regurgitate that to somebody when you're having a quick conversation about who you are and what you could bring to their company, or how it might align to a specific job. So I spent the last 3 days with students in a digital platform. You got to get comfortable using a camera. now, yesterday, 3 weeks ago, a month ago, we had so many students that just didn't engage. Normally we do in-person events. Normally you're sat at a table with a professional. You wouldn't show up there and have a bag over your head. You got to have the camera on. You got to get comfortable being present, because if not, you're missing the opportunities. We're going to go into a fall where we're going to help companies go into a virtual fair environment. You're going to be expected. We did this 3 years ago. For the last 3 years, we weren't going to do it this year, and then a pandemic hit. It was very chat room based. Now it's all going to be video based. So whatever you got to do, you got to get comfortable with it. There's going to be breakout rooms where you're in small groups, and you got to figure out how to have a digital conversation and do all the things that Lisa and Ruth just talked about, but you got to be comfortable with it. And unfortunately, what I witnessed the last few days is way too many students aren't taking that opportunity. They're taking in the information, they're just not engaging in a visual way, and that's got to change if you want to stand out.
Really great advice. Although I bet they might be Snapchatting.
Probably are doing a lot of things that we can't see, but yeah.
I'm sure they were engaged. It just wasn't there.
No condemnation. You just aren't present to the people that matter the most, that they can hire you.
Right. That's right.
No, it's very true. Brett, did you have a thought there as well?
No, I agree. Engage. You have to engage and look the part too. I've been amazed by some of these calls I've been on, and my team, we dress like just as we would if we're in the meeting. Why would we change that when we're behind a camera? And I've had some tough conversations with people that think, well, I'm at home, I can wear a t-shirt and jeans. No, you're still engaged in the business, in the conversation, in the interview, whatever it is.
Yes.
Be who you say you are. Be who you would be in real life behind the camera. I think some organizations have been pretty laxed on that. And, we've gone in and talked to senior executives, and we're all dressed up in our suits or our sports coats, and they're in t-shirts and ball hat caps. And like, that says a lot about your culture and who you are. And it gets back to my paramount point. Are we going to be able to build the right culture? I think that has to be very intentional. We have to communicate the clarity of those expectations and that mission. And we have to have the same level of accountability we would in real life in an office environment. And we can get there. I think it's completely possible, but engage, look the part, be the part, build relationships, figure out who you are and what your passion is, and then go get it.
Excellent.
My very first boss, I was buying grain from farmers in Memphis, Tennessee. And it was the mid 80s, and we worked at the grain elevator. It was an aluminum building outside the grain elevator. And most of my work was on the phone with farmers. And my very first boss, a gentleman by the name of Joe Sparks, who I owe a debt of gratitude to today, said to all of us, not just me, dress professionally, act professionally. And the guys had to wear coat and tie, and the women had to dress professionally. And it was 90 degrees in Memphis, Tennessee in August, and it was unpleasant, but it does cause you to have a mindset that is consistent with the way that you hopefully desire to perform. And it made a difference. And so, Brett, I agree. I get on the calls sometimes and I look at people, I'm like, okay, I get that it's a little more low key because you're working from home, but the sweatshirt and the hoodie, not sure that that's quite the image that you want to project around, around the environment in which we're operating today. So.
And I would add, when you're in person, I think we have a more casual culture. And Mark, I'm sure this is probably some of what you're teaching and helping your students with as well. But again, what job do you want? It's an old saying, dress for the next job, not even for the job you have. But what is the culture of your company? And I would just say, from a woman's perspective, you want to be taken seriously. You don't want to be the pretty girl, right? You want to be taken seriously for what you bring and the value you bring to the organization. And so what you wear, it matters. And for men, it matters. And it's easy to become more casual. It's easy just to kind of use your normal clothes that you might wear when you hang out with your friends. But that's not what you should look like, not ever. And it does separate people, very much. And you could argue that's good or bad and it doesn't really matter, but there's a culture in whatever company you're going to, and you need to understand what that is. And if they wear jackets, you need to buy some jackets, you know, and that's just what you need to, it's always better to be slightly overdressed than underdressed. People will take you much more seriously if you're dressed appropriately.
So very true. Although it's a little harder on Zoom, I think. But, you know, we all know what Zoom attire is. It's from here to here. It's one thing. You might have shorts and flip-flops below, right? But this is what we're seeing for sure. Well, it's been a real pleasure to have this conversation. And we still have questions coming in and comments coming in. But I promised our AGR leadership folks that we wouldn't go past 7:10, and we did. Because it was just too much going on. But with that, I think I should tie a bow around this and let everyone who knows sent in questions. We will answer those. That's part of the commitment of our panel, and we appreciate that extra commitment. And we thank you so much for sharing your insights and your time with us. It's very much appreciated. And we look forward to connecting up with your future hires as they might have come through this event tonight, and look forward to the rest of the AGR gathering as well. Jay, I'll take it back to you.
Thank you, Charlene, and I want to thank you again for a great job of being both a moderator and a panelist, and for our other 4 panelists, Ruth, Lisa, Brett, Mark, you guys did a terrific job. We will be back to you as panelists to help us answer in writing a number of really profound questions that we didn't get to yet this evening, and look forward to continuing to have a benefit from this platform that we started here tonight, certainly into the weeks and probably months ahead. So thank you also to NFA, Mark, for your co-sponsorship and bringing many students to this platform this evening. We had AFA students, we had some 4-H'ers, FFA members, we had collegiate Farm Bureau members from different campuses around the country. Really great diversity of interests and geographies that were here, and we'll get even more out of this in the days ahead. I want to give special thanks to my fellow alums at AGR, Glenn Stith and Rob McClellan, who helped me as volunteers work with Rex and the staff to put the panel together. Thanks everybody. Have a great evening.